Yesterday, Sajid Javid performed an 11th hour U-turn on his controversial no jab, no job mandate for health and social care workers.
While vaccination remains our very best line of defence against COVID-19, I believe that it is no longer proportionate to require vaccination as a condition of deployment through statute.
While 80,000 NHS workers will feel relieved to have kept their jobs, there's of course been outrage that the announcement came just 3 days before the vaccination deadline, by which point many terrified workers will have no doubt relented. And it's already too late for the estimated 40,000 who lost their jobs when the care sector vaccine mandate came into force in November. No U-turn is going to be good enough for people like former care worker Louise Accoster, whose viral video last year showed the true reality of the policy.
That's the hardest thing you've ever had to do. Saying goodbye to everybody, all the people that I've cared for so long, the people I've worked with. Because it's been so emotional. This is so unfair.
Just devastating. The Health Secretary, however, was less than empathetic to the plight of our frontline heroes.
In December, I argued, and this House overwhelmingly agreed, that the weight of clinical evidence in favour of vaccination as a condition of deployment outweighed the risks to the workforce. It was the right policy at the time, supported by the clinical evidence, and the government makes no apology for it.
So, was it wrong of the government to coerce NHS and care workers into getting vaccinated or risk losing their jobs? Email me, dan@gbnews.uk, with your thoughts. Tweet them to @gbnews. And we've got our poll running there right now. But to help you make your mind up tonight, I'm joined by the NHS GP, Dr. David Lloyd, Director of Care Campaign for the Vulnerable Jane Connery, and Andrew Salisbury, the former care worker who quit his job in part to avoid having the jab. So, Andrew, I wanted to start with you because, of course, this policy, which has now been axed, very much impacted on your life. How are you feeling today?
I'm not surprised, but I think this has come about because we were the kind of the lesser players in this, because the NHS took the brunt and they had the clout and we didn't. So we were the scapegoat the first time round. And yes, I was gutted to have to leave, but there was no way I was going to be jabbed, in this job. And like I said last year on many things, over my dead body, I was going to be jabbed. So I had to take the choice and leave the job.
And obviously that has provided the care sector with massive gaps to fill. I mean, do you have any idea how your former employer coped when folk like you left?
Well, I'm still in contact with some of my former colleagues. It's always been a short job. Nobody wants to do it. It's a hard job. People don't realise how hard it is. I only got into the care sector back in 2020. And it's a very life-changing, eye-opening job. And I loved it. It's poorly rewarded financially, but I miss my residents. I do. It's I do. I still bump into some of them occasionally out in the street, but I do feel tearful sometimes when I see them.
Bless you. I mean, no, you're doing God's work. You are doing God's work. I have so much respect for carers who, as you say, don't get paid a lot of money, work very difficult hours, and are absolutely essential to keep some of our most vulnerable in society cared for.
Well, if you pardon the pun, Dan, politicians talk out of their backsides and we wipe them. But there you go.
On that note, let me bring in Jane Connery, who is the director of the Care Campaign for the Vulnerable. You must know so many folk, Jane, like Andrew, who are doing a really good job, were absolutely loved by their residents, by their colleagues, and you've now lost them altogether for a policy that the government has reversed just weeks later.
Well, should we really be surprised at that with how the government has actually conducted themselves so far within the care sector? I think, Dan, I listened to you earlier and, I represent the families and the care workers that come to Care Campaign for the Vulnerable, and we offer direct support to them. We've seen firsthand how the government and people were outside clapping for them and for the bravery and the heroes that they were and are. And then we were, care providers were told they had to give them their P45s. I think this government has completely ill-judged the whole aspect of care and the care sector, and more importantly, the elderly that are in them. And I absolutely agree with so many carers that are coming to us that were absolutely in tears, saying that they were leaving a job that they absolutely loved because they were forced to have the vaccine. And I absolutely categorically state that the fallout to the vulnerable elderly in care homes because of the lack of staff, like you say, 40,000 down, is impalpable. It's absolutely shocking. And quite frankly, he should go.
But Dr. David Lloyd, you actually believe that this policy was right.
Well, if we could just talk briefly about the science. There are 15,000 people in hospital at the moment. The vast majority of them are going to be unvaccinated. Nobody dies from the Omicron variant if you've been vaccinated. You've got an 80% less chance of going into hospital if you've been vaccinated 3 times. The science is overwhelming that the vaccine is safe. I think we really have to go back to first principles and say, I know that people don't like having things done to them which they don't want to have done. But for a very long time, it's been compulsory for doctors and nurses in the health service to be vaccinated against hepatitis B. I fail to see the difference between hepatitis B vaccination and COVID vaccination being made compulsory in a job where patients expect that their doctors and their nurses and their frontline
David,
workers
just
are
hold
vaccinated.
that thought, because you've raised some really interesting points, and I want to put it straight to Andrew, who obviously made this decision. So, Andrew, you've heard from the doctor there. How do you respond? He says this is perfectly safe. What are you worried about?
Well, let me put it so. I'm not anti-vax, yeah? I just choose not to have it. I had a flu jab many years ago. It made me so ill. The hepatitis thing I can understand more because that's to do with the blood, yeah? But this is like, we catch colds and stuff like that. We had, when we were working in the set, we had PPE. I've had more stuff I've had to put on my nose during the week, being tested. We took all the precautions, yeah? We kept COVID out. I've not tested once for COVID, even since I've left.
Okay, no, I understand, Andrew. Let me bring David back in. David, you continue.
What do I have to say? That was all nonsense.
Why?
Well, because it's not based on any facts. It's about personal feelings, about having to put swabs up your nose, which everybody should. It's about feelings about vaccinations and about something about the blood and hepatitis. COVID is far more deadly than hepatitis B, and yet it is compulsory in the States. Would you wear a seatbelt in your car, or don't you wear seatbelts in your car?
Of course, but you must believe as a doctor,
is it a terrible
bodily
infringement
autonomy
on my liberty that I'm being forced to wear a seatbelt?
Well, I thought one of the principles, David, of the medical profession was bodily autonomy. I think it's something that's incredibly important. So that's where I stand on this.
Absolutely. If a chain smoker comes into me with lung cancer, I will treat them with exactly the same compassion as someone who comes in who doesn't smoke. A man who never exercises, an alcoholic, a drug user, we all treat everybody the same.
So you think folk like Andrew should have lost their job?
We've got to make a change.
So you think folk like Andrew should have lost their job and they should still stay out of work in the care sector?
And I think we're now pushing together 2 entirely different issues. We can't afford to lose, as was I found out, 5% of the clinical workforce of the NHS were going to have their P45s on the 3rd of February. It's an impossible ask to do that. And the same numbers were lost their jobs as care workers. So we have to ask the question is, should we now be asking these amazing social care workers to come back to their jobs?
Yeah, well, I think we should. Jane Connery, we need these folk back, don't we? We need folk like Andrew back now, Jane.
Absolutely, Dan, and I think we're missing the whole point here. We're actually supporting families every day who are going in as essential caregivers. I'm supporting many families, many daughters, sons in their 60s, 70s, looking after their 90, 100-year-old loved ones. They are at retirement age and they're actually caring for their loved ones because of the short staff crisis in care homes. And I absolutely sit here and I think, whilst we're all discussing, I agree, it's not about being anti-vax, it's about common sense. And I think that's been absolutely void in the care sector. I mean, the government haven't even spoken to the sector. Care England, the National Care Association, nobody's actually spoken to the people that are actually in the care sector and seeing the challenges that they're faced every day. And whilst we are losing care staff workers, they have a choice, and everybody should have a choice, including NHS. And this is not about being anti-vax. It's nonsense. It's about what you do to safeguard people that are in care where carers, that they're short-staffed. It's as simple as that.
Absolutely, and I hear you, Jane. I completely hear you. That is Jane Connery, Director of the Care Campaign for the Vulnerable. Before that, Dr. David Lloyd, an NHS GP, and also former care worker Andrew Salisbury, who I hope will return now to the care sector because we need folk like him.